Welcome back. You're watching France 24. Coming up, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer elected to succeed Angela Merkel as leader of the CDU, the German chancellor's protege, beating out the more conservative Friedrich Merz by just 30 votes. The French cabinet convenes as Paris braces for another tense Saturday of demonstrations by yellow vest protesters. After last week's rioting, 89,000 police deployed nationwide. As the UN's climate summit meets in Poland, parts of Europe draw lessons from their driest summer in the years. In this edition, the tiny pellets one French inventor thinks can help save the planet. After the news, it'll be The World This Week. And Emmanuel Macron's moment of truth. How does a French president who vowed never to back down rebound after he has backed down? Those protesters aren't going away. We're also going to be asking our Friday panel of journalists, what's the matter with Huawei? The number two, the Chinese telecoms giant, to be extradited to the U.S. over alleged Iran sanctions flouting as Huawei faces espionage suspicions by Japan, the EU, the UK. Your thoughts on those stories and more on Facebook and on Twitter. Hashtag World This Week. The chances of Angela Merkel serving out her final term as chancellor just improved dramatically. The Christian Democrats electing Merkel's protege, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, to take the helm as party secretary, AKK as she is known, pipping the more conservative Friedrich Merz with a little less than 52% of the vote in the second round of balloting in Hamburg.
I accept the result of the vote, and I thank you for your trust. And I would like to especially cordially thank Jens Spahn and Friedrich Merz for the fair contest we had.
And reporting from the CDU party conference in Hamburg, correspondent Emmanuel Chaz.
Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer was the favorite for this election, but she won only after a very tight vote, and that shows you just how divided this party really is, because Friedrich Merz had only 30 votes less than Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer in the second term. So this is going to be a very interesting month to follow this election, where Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer has talked about the future of the CDU. She has also mentioned several times, she has also several times tried to differentiate herself from Angela Merkel. She is the chancellor's protege, but also in order to win, she has to prove that she has her own vision for Germany, and in doing so, she's also ensuring the continuity of the policies that were implemented by Angela Merkel, contrary to what Friedrich Merz, who was veering the CDU towards the right in his project, contrary to what Merz had proposed during his speech today.
Emmanuel Chaz. As Paris hunkers down for another Saturday of protests by yellow vests angry over cost of living increases, the Prime Minister earlier convening a cabinet crisis meeting. The government to mobilize some 89,000 police nationwide, 8,000 for the capital. They'll be backed up by armored vehicles to clear barricades. François Vibo has more.
Anything that can be thrown or used as a barricade must go. For several days in Paris, teams of workers have been clearing the streets.
We've taken out the heavy iron grates that are usually at the foot of the trees. We've also removed construction barriers, paving stones, and other objects, which had already been ripped out of the streets.
Paris is preparing for a third Saturday of protests. This map shows areas identified by the police as high risk. Just weeks away from Christmas, many shops have opted to close for the day and boarded up their windows. Some have even hired private security guards to protect their storefronts. On Friday, the Interior Minister seemed ready for riots.
As it stands, everything leads us to believe that these radical elements, these agitators, will once again try to mobilize tomorrow. This is why we've planned such a large-scale response.
In Paris alone, that's 8,000 police officers and gendarmes, almost twice as many as last week. They'll be supported by a dozen armoured vehicles, yet police unions remain concerned about their safety.
Given what went down the past 2 Saturdays, and seeing the kinds of weapons we've seized, machetes, hatchets, projectiles designed to maim or kill, well, we're very worried about what might happen.
Last Saturday's protests left 133 people wounded and are estimated to have caused up to €4 million in property damage.
After celebrating the start of Yemen's first peace talks in 2 years, now comes the hard part. It's day 2 of negotiations in Sweden. Houthi rebels rejecting 2 key government demands. One that the Iran-aligned movements hand over the strategic port of Hodeidah. The other that Sana'a International Airport resumes service, but only with domestic flights. Also in this edition, as we take a look at the COP24 summit that's been taking place in Poland all week, we've also been looking at how climate change is impacting France. Now, we're coming off one of the driest summers in decades, but one inventor thinks he's got the answer.
In France, 2018 was a scorcher. 3/4 of départements were hit hard by drought. And record dry, hot weather continued into this autumn. French farmers were hit hard.
We had very hot periods like last year, but that was shorter. This year, we didn't have any water for a month and a half. That's so long.
Now, one French horticulturalist claims he has the solution. Philippe Ouaki-de-Giorno is the inventor of Politer, highly absorbent granules which capture and store moisture, so that only around 5% is lost during watering.
They're little granules, here in their dry form, with fertilizer and nutritional elements inside. They can absorb a spectacular amount of water, and then they turn it into solid chunks.
The crystals are made of 95% organic matter, mainly cellulose, and the plant fusions its roots onto them.
It's as if the plant has a bundle attached with water and fertilizer inside, its own well and larder, if you like. And thanks to that, the problems due to variations in temperature or availability of water are just dealt with.
The granules also contain a small amount of biodegradable plastic, and some experts say it needs more independent, long-term testing. At present, Politer isn't licensed for growing food crops in France, but it's been used in this flower nursery for 7 years. The boss, Nicolas, has noticed a difference.
These were planted on the 4th of September, this one using Politer and this one without it. In terms of watering, we water the plants with Politer 3 times less often than the others.
The exact formula for Politer is kept secret. Philippe Ouaki-de-Giorno says he's always resisted selling it to a big industrial group to keep control of his invention, which he says could make a huge difference.
This is the antidote to problems of food security or climate chaos. It's even an antidote to deforestation.
He currently exports 150 tons of granules a year, mainly to the developing world, such as here in Senegal. Enough to replant many thousands of hectares of previously dried out land.
See you on the dark side of the moon goes the song. Well, that's about to happen. China to become the first country to land a probe on the moon's far side.
Hoping to shed some light on the dark side of the moon. China is set to become the first country to launch a mission to the side of the moon that can't be directly observed from Earth, the only part of our satellite still unexplored. Consisting of a lander and rover, the Chang'e 4 will have to complete the critical landing on the moon's far side completely autonomously because radio waves are blocked. In fact, the probe will be out of direct contact with Earth for the duration of its mission. To get around this, China launched a satellite in May to rotate around the moon and relay signals from the Chang'e 4 back to ground stations. After landing, the rover will start the new year exploring both the surface and subsurface of this region, taking photos and radiation measurements and testing for water. China arrived relatively late to space travel, but has ramped up its program since its first manned spaceflight in 2003. This mission lays the groundwork for an even more ambitious project, building a human outpost on the moon by 2030.
And we have more news coming up for you. Time now for the world this week.